Good evening, everybody. This is Pedro. Welcome back to Thoughts and Bolts. Today, we're going to continue our series on the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies leaks. But we're going to focus on the alien implant issue. Before I go any further, I want to give a shout out to the Mind Sublime. The Mind Sublime is a YouTuber who, as far as I know, was the first to actually figure out what the Defense Intelligence Reference documents produced by OSAP really were. Everyone thought this was just speculative science or descriptions of the state of the art. But what he showed was that no, they're really esoteric writing about the UFO phenomenon. Yes, they are speculative with regards to what we might be able to do in the future. Yes, they are descriptions of state-of-the-art technology, but they were written with the UFO phenomenon in mind. Okay, and he was the first one to really notice that, and he was the first one to see the relationship between the OSAP DIRDs relating to biosensors and the phenomenon of abductees having what appear to be implants inside their bodies. Okay, so he was the first one to connect those two dots. Um, that was 4 years ago, right? A lot has come out since then. And so I have to give credit where credit is due. In many ways, what you're about to see is an extension of the work he already did. So watch his video. Of course, this is about the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies leaks. Um, and what I've been doing and what I want to do is kind of correlate them and cross-reference them with some of the work produced by the people who actually worked in that program. So, as I've said a million times, Jim Lukatsky was the operations manager. I'm sorry, he was the director of OSAP. Okay, he was the guy in charge of OSAP. Colin Kelleher was the operations manager. Okay. And what's really interesting is that when it comes to this issue of alien implants, these books are silent. Now, both of these books had to go through the DOPSR process. They had to go through the Office of Pre-Publication Security Review. Now, just because something goes through DOPSR, that doesn't mean it's true. However, if something is blocked by DOPSR, it almost certainly is true. Now, neither of these books talk about the implant issue. I would like to know if it's because there was nothing to write. So they didn't even write about it because, Bigelow Aerospace didn't even look into it. Okay. Or did they actually write about it and it was blocked by DOPSR? I don't have the answer to that. I would like to know. Now, what they do write in Skinwalkers in the Pentagon is an appendix, okay, that shows a lot of the material, research material they produced. Okay, so, you have the two defense intelligence reference documents written by Dr. Bruce Tao of Arizona State University on biomaterials and biosensors. Now, the fact that they named the authors of these dirds is very important because it allows people like you and me to really dig our teeth in and follow those branches to wherever they may lead. So Bruce Tao produced these two dirds, okay? But before we get into why that's significant, and again, I want to expand a little bit more on what we covered in the last episode. And I want to do that chronologically. Okay, so let's go back to 1996. Okay, in 1996, there was something called the National Institute of Discovery Science, which was founded by Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow is the billionaire founder of Bigelow Aerospace. Okay, he has a lot of money and even more curiosity. Okay, and he wanted to get to the bottom of the UFO phenomenon. So he started the National Institute of Discovery Science, and he recruited the most professional, methodical, and careful ufologists around and put them on one team along with other scientists who didn't have any background in UFOs. Okay. Um, Dr. John Mack was part of NIDS. Okay. Dr. John Mack was the Harvard psychiatrist who did pioneering research on abductees, right? He found that when he worked with these people who claimed to have been abducted, they weren't crazy and they weren't lying. He couldn't tell you what actually happened to them, right? Because he wasn't there, but he can tell you that they weren't crazy and they weren't lying and that they were all essentially telling the same story without having even met each other. Okay. So, NIDS was a big deal. And NIDS, a lot of the people that worked in NIDS eventually became part of the OSAP program themselves. Okay. So, Dr. Roger Lear was this podiatrist in Southern California, and people who had claimed to be abducted by UFOs and who also claimed to have something in them that wasn't in them before, they went to him, and him being a podiatrist, performed these rather routine um, surgical procedures where he took these things out of their feet and out of their hands. Um, what you see on the screen here is a book Roger Lear wrote called Alien Implants. It was part of the series produced by Whitley Strieber. And the photos you see here are from the Coast to Coast website, which has apparently photos of some implants that were extracted by Dr. Roger Lear. You'll notice that there's kind of like this gooey, membraney, gelatinous covering, and that's hiding within some thing, some black thing, that who knows what it is, but that's the kind of stuff they were taking out of people's bodies. Roger Lear, in his book, says that he didn't just go to NIDS and give a presentation on this work, but that he actually handed these, not these specifically, but he actually handed some of the implants he had extracted to Bob Bigelow himself. So he literally handed some of these implants to Bob Bigelow. Now, here's a little um, description by Roger Lear. If you want to pause it, you can read it for yourself, you can. Now, in 2004, NIDS disbands. Okay, Bob Bigelow shuts the door on NIDS. 2008, MUFON uh, produces this implant extraction action plan for Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. We went over this in the last episode, right? This was part of the OSAP leaks. What's really interesting is the team they wanted to impose, right? They wanted a physician or dental surgeon who was licensed in the location of extraction to perform minor surgery. Okay. They wanted a radio frequency and digital electrical engineer with experience in the medical field. They wanted a biochemist with a metallurgical background. They wanted a biophysicist, and they wanted two mental health practitioners. What I really find interesting about this that I didn't describe in the last episode is that not only, first of all, you're going from the macro to the micro, right? So you have the physicians that extract the implant, then you have engineers that study the implant as the technology, then you have chemical study, right? So you're going from the object itself to now the substance of what it's made out of, right? So you're going to chemistry, then you're going into physics, and then you're going into consciousness. Okay. So it's almost like this reverse great chain of being, right? If you're an idealist, right? Um, and I think that's interesting. Okay. This is again thoughts and bolts in action. Okay. If you look at this list from the bottom up, you have consciousness, then subatomic particles, right? Then, molecules in chemicals, that sort of thing, and then all the way up to the actual technology of the implant. Um, I don't know. I think it's an interesting parallel, but you tell me. Now, a year after that report was made by MUFON on behalf of Bigelow Aerospace, OSAP slash ATIP officially starts. Okay. And then a year after that, Dr. Bruce Tao produces his biosensor and biomaterial defense intelligence reference documents. Okay. So that's interesting. And a year after that, Bruce Tao files patents for new implant technology. Okay. This isn't strange. He has multiple implants. I mean, he has multiple patents. But what I find interesting is if you actually look at this patent that he filed in 2011, Okay. Um, it looks very much like a Roger Lear UFO implant, okay, in terms of its form. Okay. As you can see, there's a protective layer which may protect the body and biological material from the piezoelectric device. For example, the piezoelectric device may contain metals or chemicals that may be harmful to the body if not encapsulated in a protective layer. And that looks a lot like the Roger Lear alien implants. Okay. It's the same form, the same substance, but the same form. Okay. Um, so look, I can't say that Bruce Tao's patents are reverse engineered alien technology. I can't say that. But as any historian will tell you, right? If you have a correct timeline of historical events, that tells you 90% of the story. Okay. Now, look, we can say for sure that Roger Lear handed over implants Bob Bigelow when Bob Bigelow was running NIDS. Okay. We can say for sure that MUFON handed to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies a plan of action for extracting their own batch of implants from UFO contactees. We went over that in the last video. We can say for a fact that Bigelow Aerospace, specifically AAWSAP, ATIP, had an interest in biosensors and biomaterials, and that Bruce Tao produced the Defense Intelligence Reference documents relating to that subject. And we can say for sure that a year later, Bruce Tao filed patents for technology that looks like, in form, the kind of stuff Roger Lear was taking out of UFO abductees. Okay, those are facts. Okay, now if that's not good enough for you, the question remains. Okay, if the DoD was interested in this subject in the past, is it still interested in it now? And was the DoD even interested in it, right? You could say, oh no, this is all because of, Bigelow's former relationship to Dr. Roger Lear and the work NIDS did. Okay. But that isn't true, actually. Let's look at Dr. Gary Nolan, okay, one of the most respected scientists on the planet, okay, who's active also in the study of UFOs and what he has to say about implants and that sort of thing. So let's go to Twitter and see what he has to say.
I don't feel it's my responsibility nor prudent to go there until I address some of the more addressable issues, like medical harm. I can take the same MRI of the same person and show that the same thing that thing happened to them, and I can compare it to 100 other people where they claim the same thing. I can take materials, and I can take a piece of that material, lop it off, give it to another scientist, and they can find out the same thing that I did. You take the Atacama mummy, somebody take another piece of that skin, do the same study, and prove me right or wrong. Which is, we're now 11 or 12 years after that, and the people who claim that I was a fraud, they have yet to disprove me. So I dare them. I dare them. And he who shall not be named know who I'm talking about. So, because I know I'm right. So it's like we have to address the things that are scientifically addressable. I can't address right now telepathy. Other people might be able to. I can't address claimed abductions, or I had a government agency come to me, in the last year asking for my help with claimed implants. I had a government agency come to me, in the last year asking for my help with claimed implants. I had a government agency come to me, in the last year asking for my help with claimed implant. I had a government agency come to me. I had a government agency come to me. I had a government agency come to me, in the last year asking for my help with claimed implants. I said, I want nothing to do with them.
Mind you, Gary Nolan said this in 2025, April 2025. So as late as 2024, a government agency came to him, okay, who's this master, what is he, a chemist? You know, he's a master, yeah, he's a chemist. He's a biochemist, if I'm not mistaken, right? Carlotta A. Harris professor in Department of Pathology at the Stanford University School of Medicine, okay, postdoctoral work for the first cloning slash characterization of NFKB, I don't know what, okay? So he's a biologist, chemist, biochemist, okay, OChem guy. Now, as early as last year, the government agency approached him to do work on alleged implants. Now, he didn't want to do anything with that. And I don't blame him. Okay. Let's be honest. If some experiencer comes to you and they say they have an implant and it's extracted and you study it and you say, well, I don't know what this is. And it turns out it was cancer and that person dies a year later from cancer that wasn't diagnosed. Not only are you in a lot of legal trouble, but you're in a lot of ethical trouble, morally. Okay. So I can understand why he wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. However, his witness does support the idea that the government intelligence was interested in alien implants as recently as last year. Okay, so that really makes the OSAP interest in alien implants the you know, the likely effect of DoD interest in implants. Okay. So this is the timeline, right? And again, I'm not saying Bruce Tao's patents are reverse engineered alien tech. I'm not. But what I am saying is that they might be inspired by real non-human intelligence tech. Okay, that this might be a derivative technology, maybe. Okay, and we have evidence to support that theory. Theory is not its own proof, and evidence for a theory does not constitute proof. Okay, remember, ufology, this whole subject is a hall of mirrors. Okay, we are walking in a very foggy forest, and we can only see the trees that are directly in front of us. Okay, and based on those trees and shadows, we have to kind of guess what might lie beyond them. Okay. But look, I go back. The form is the same. The substance is not the same. Okay. And, you know, here you have it. I mean, OSAP was interested in this subject. OSAP, we can show, was interested in extracting its own alien implants from contactees, the way Roger Lear had done in the 90s. Okay, they wanted a fresh batch of these implants. Whether they actually did this or not, we don't know. Okay, but Bruce Tao did write the birds on this subject, and through Gary Nolan, we know that the intelligence community is still interested in this subject, and we know that after Bruce Tao did this work for Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. After Bruce Tao did this work for OSAP, he did produce a patent for an implant that looks a lot like one of the Roger Lear UFO abductee implants in terms of form. Now, if if this theory is right and that the Bruce Tao technology is derived from, inspired by um, the implants taken out of UFO abductees, Then we have kind of a model of what so-called reverse engineering looks like, right? And it's very similar to what Philip Corso talked about in his book, The Day After Roswell, right? If you remember, Philip Corso, he was high up in the army, and he said that he was given handheld technology from the Roswell crash, and that he gave these to private industry, okay? And that private industry created derived technologies from those, you know, non-human technologies, okay? If that's true, this might be an example of that. And what it shows is that even if you cannot replicate the substance, even if you can't replicate the material science from a non-human technology, you can certainly attempt to replicate the form, and in so doing, attain some of the same effects, even if in a degraded form, right? Very interesting. Okay, so again, Dr. Tao, if you're watching this, I'm sure you're smart enough to come up with this on your own. Okay, but based on the work you've done in the past for AAWSAP, which was a classified UFO program for the Department of Defense, and based on AAWSAP's interest in extracting so-called implants from people who claim to be abductees, we have to ask the question, given what Gary Nolan tells us about the intelligence community's continued interest in this subject, whether or not your technology is inspired by a non-human technology. Okay. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if that's yes or no. Okay. But I leave it to you, the viewer, to decide for yourself. Because as far as laying out the facts, I did that in this video. Okay. And now it's up to you to make up your own conclusion. Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. I want to grow this channel. I recently hit 40 subscribers, which is awesome, right? Every time you have like 10 more subscribers, in my view, that's a good thing, right? So I'm at 40 subscribers. I want more. If you like, share, and subscribe, assuming you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have more of those subscribers. And if you're watching this on X, which is my main platform, so I want to grow this thing on X more than I do on YouTube. Uh, please share this with others. But this timeline, it's solid as a rock. Okay. What that means, I'll leave it up to you to decide. That's that. I mean, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. And as always, look inward before you look upward. Learn to meditate. Okay. Don't have your attention all up in your thoughts, all up in your phone. Have your attention on the world around you. Smell the flowers. Look at the trees. Look at the spider webs. Look at people. Don't stare at them, but look at people. Look at the world in front of you. Live in a bigger space than just what's in front of your hands. And I guarantee you, you'll be a lot happier, a lot more effective. And if you cultivate that kind of present moment awareness, you'll be a psychonaut, and you'll be able to understand more about consciousness, and in so doing, more about the UFO phenomenon than in any other way. Thank you.